And the Prime Minister was castigated during the week for telling his party room that the Senate was feral. I don't know why. It is feral. It keeps blocking the government's legislation, most of the time for no good reason. And Tony Abbott clarified his comments by saying he didn't mean the crossbenchers. He meant that Greens and Labor were feral. But crossbench Senator David Leyonhjelm had some pretty sharp words for the Prime Minister about the way he is handling the crossbench. He's on the line. Good evening, Senator.
Good evening.
You don't think Tony Abbott is doing a good job of schmoozing you?
I don't like to personalise my politics, so I'm not criticising Tony Abbott himself. I'm critical of the government and its relationship with the crossbench. I actually think he's got a point about some of the crossbench. They are a bit feral. I wish they would inform themselves a bit more and not base some of their decisions on the most superficial nonsense. I guess my criticism of the government is its relationship with the crossbench you could summarise it as transactional rather than relationship-based. By that I mean they only want to deal with us on the crossbench in order to get a transaction done. So what do I have to do to get your vote kind of thing? And then after they've got our vote or not got our vote, as the case may be, then see you later, I don't remember your name.
Which is not a smart way of dealing. I mean, I agree with you. If you need, no matter whether you like them or not, your 8 members of the crossbench are pretty powerful, and ministers have to deal with you in order to get legislation through. And I mean, Scott Morrison did a good job of that, didn't he?
He did, that's right. And Matthias Cormann has also done a good job. Scott Morrison was on quite a steep learning curve with his immigration bill. In the beginning, it was strictly transactional. But over time, he discovered, that the 8 of us were really different. We don't meet, we don't share the same views. I think several of the crossbench would be much happier with a Labor government than with a Liberal government. And Nick Xenophon would be happy with a Greens government, I think. So, we are quite diverse. And Scott Morrison sort of found that out in his dealings with us. And over time, it became more relationship-based. And that's actually standing him in good stead now that he's in social welfare. And he's essentially saying to us, or at least those of us who are trying to be constructive, give me your ideas. I'm open to ideas. I'm new in this job. I'm willing to listen, and I'd like to hear what your thoughts are. That's more of a relationship-based approach, and I think that pays off. Now, Matthias Cormann, he's the example I use all the time of someone who knew that right from the start. He didn't need to learn it. He says to me, it's nothing different from dealing with the Western Australian Liberal Party. You do a deal and you get their vote and you give them your vote next time or something like that.
It's just respect, really, with people you work with. And I do agree with you. I think that the Abbott government they're patchy anyway in their dealings with the Senate, and it's just crazy. Now, you're a libertarian, and while I agree with a lot of your ideas, I'm not so sure about your marriage equality bill. And the reason is that this will now be the 12th time in 5 years that this issue's come before federal parliament, and the answer is always the same: no to same-sex marriage. And yet here you are again. Why? Surely there are better things to talk about.
No, well, it's not a high priority for me in personal terms, but it's kind of a totemic issue. And the other thing I'm trying to establish, Miranda, is that it's not an equality issue, it's not a discrimination issue, it's a libertarian issue. It's a question of getting the government out of your personal life. Now, I'm not gay, and I have no great inclination towards marriage either. But I don't.
Are you married?
Well, de facto, for 30 years, yeah. So I don't need a piece of paper from the government to tell me that I'm married. But some people do, and for the government to withhold that, for most people who get married, it's a public declaration of commitment and presumably love in most cases. So public declaration of commitment, and they get a certificate from the government that says you're married, and it has certain legal consequences, although they are a lot less than they used to be. Now, why should the government withhold that? in certain situations.
But it's more than just a piece of paper, though. It's an institution that has, is evolved in every society, in every major religion. It is the place where children, so many studies show that children are much better off in a stable, intact relationship. And of course, it doesn't really matter so much to people at the top of the social pecking order, but the destruction of marriage, which heterosexuals have done a very good job of destroying, and I must say they've, it's in a very parlous state thanks to heterosexual fecklessness, but it's the people at the bottom of the social pecking order and children who are the most damaged by that. So my view is just that people who want to redefine what marriage is need to make the case that they won't be making things even worse. Can you make that case?
Well, my view is that these are matters for civil society, not for regulation. Yes, marriage has evolved, and there is a very strong case for all the points you've made. Mind you, the issue of children and requiring a mother and a father, I don't disagree with that. That the fact that they're better off with, in a loving family with a mother and a father. But there is a couple of points there. First of all, a loving family of both males or both females is actually better than a discordant family of a male and a female. And the other thing is a lot of people aren't aware of the fact that same-sex couples have been allowed for some years now to adopt children. So the idea that somehow this is being prevented by preventing same-sex marriage is actually factually incorrect.
But you're enshrining it. You really are changing the definition of marriage. And
the definition of marriage has changed over time.
But not from being between a man and a woman.
No, it hasn't. But it used to be. You couldn't have a black person and a white person getting married, or a Catholic and
but that's that's completely different. I don't buy that argument that this is a civil rights situation at all.
Mm-hmm. Well,
but I mean, you want a conscience vote, don't you? Your aim for this is to force the Liberal Party into having a conscience vote.
I'm not trying to force it.
Well, though, encourage.
Yes, that's right. I'm trying to induce them to do the same as the other parties have done, which is to have a conscience vote on the issue. Then, if they do, I'm perfectly happy once they've reached that point, for it then to take time. But surveys suggest that a substantial majority of people have no objections to same-sex marriage. I acknowledge that there are some people who are passionately opposed to it, and my good friend in the Senate, Bob Day, is one of them. But the fact is that well over half, I'm told 70-odd% of Australians are quite relaxed about same-sex marriage. In time, with a conscience vote, and I'm not suggesting it's going to be before the next election necessarily, but in time, I'm sure that the MPs that the people elect will reflect that majority decision or that majority attitude in the community.
Well, usually MPs are shown to be very much more progressive than the electorate, and that 70% figure, I don't. I've seen figures that are wildly different to that. But the problem with the conscience vote is that it just opens up the MPs to the really savage intimidation tactics of the same-sex lobby, and that is something that I think turns off a lot of people who might otherwise be, a bit more open-minded. They just see this very almost totalitarian shutting down of the debate, really vicious character assassination of anyone who tries to stand up for traditional marriage.
Well, it doesn't. The two wrongs don't make a right, but there is the same wrong applies on the other side, Miranda. The Australian Christian lobby and groups associated with it are absolutely ferocious in their opposition to same-sex marriage, and as well, their lobbying of MPs, including myself, is quite formidable. And
But I don't know of anyone losing their job like that guy who was the CEO of Mozilla did in America when all he'd done was donate $1,000 to a traditional marriage group that was against same-sex marriage, and he was hounded out of his job. And
I don't approve of that.
No, and SBS wouldn't run a very gentle ad about traditional marriage during the Gay Mardi Gras.
And I objected to that. In fact, I had an SBS executive come to see me the very next day, and he left with a flea in his ear. Free speech is one of my fundamental tenants. And,
yeah. Well, look, you're very interesting, and you bring a lot of good ideas and sort of light and colour and some good common sense in a lot of ways. Although I disagree with you on same-sex marriage. But so thanks very much for joining us, David Leyonhjelm, and good luck.
Thank you very much, Miranda.